Cheers to Cobb.
Cheers to Cobb. It's Friday after 12 o'clock. I think we can.
Here at the Battery. Matt had the brilliant idea of doing some off-site locations, some field trips.
I mean, it's great. I mean, it's Friday at 12 o'clock, and there's kids playing back there. There's people ready for the Braves game 7 hours from now. I see people decked out in Braves gear, and I don't know. I love being down here sometimes.
Yeah, I've never come here not for game time, but I'm realizing I really need to come out here and just enjoy the Battery.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great place. I mean, we've come down here just to watch the Braves games when they're out of town, just on the big screen right there.
Yeah.
And there's people who bring out their lawn chairs and everything, and it's a great experience.
I have friends who go to just get pizza and Tico, bring it out here on the field, have a little picnic.
Yep.
So we're here to talk about the Board of Commissioners meeting. It happened on the 12th, Tuesday the 12th. It was a morning meeting, 9 a.m. We've also since then had Commissioner Richardson had her community huddle around the millage rate, and that's really, both meetings are heavily focused on.
So the millage rate's staying the same, but I think a lot of people are upset that because, I think some assessments were kind of frozen during COVID, and I think we're kind of catching up right now. And so a lot of people saw their tax bill and saw that it jumped up a good bit, or their property values got reassessed, and and they're seeing that they owe a bit more in taxes now.
And they're getting one big bill from the county, but it's split up, right? So you have the general fund, which is staying the same, and it stayed flat over the years, especially if you have homestead exemption, which a lot of people do. Fire fund is going up a little bit. You can't apply exemption to fire fund, but the big one is school board, and that one is going up. I mean, I saw like an average bill; it went up like over $800 in the past year. And the school board is actually lowering their millage rate, and the tax bill is still coming up way higher. But that's where the bulk of the increase is coming from, it seems.
Yeah, and so all of those pressures are now put on the commissioners, because they're the ones who actually wind up approving and authorizing the millage rate for all the items, because the county is responsible for collecting the taxes with the tax assessor. So
the one nuance is they're ratifying the school board's increase, but they have no control over it. They basically have this like function that the state requires them to perform to collect the money from the school board and pass it on. And so it's really an approval to do what they're mandated to do.
And you even see some public commenters sit there and say you have the power to say no to them, but really, I mean, I think the county attorney was very clear. He listed off multiple court cases that set the precedent that no, it's literally and we don't want the county. We elected a school board to set these. We elected a county commission to set the county millage rate, and I don't think we want the county commissioners to control too much of what the school board's doing.
Yeah, and so what we've encouraged people to do is like you're speaking to us, go to the school board and tell them what you think, right? And I think there is a lot of confusion, and it's rightfully so. I mean, if you're not really paying attention to all the nuances of local government, you don't know, but you're just kind of getting this one big bill.
You're seeing it jumped up $800.
So I'm happy that people are showing up. I'm really happy people are speaking their mind. And for the most part, it's been pretty respectful. I mean, I think a lot of people are heated, and times are hard for many people, and bills are going up. And so, what we did last night was Commissioner Richardson was like sitting down with people's bills and saying, okay, this is how it works. This is where things are going up. This is where things are staying flat. And just a little bit of education and communication is helping at least create more understanding of what's happening. At the end of the day, one of the questions was asked last night. It's like, okay, if you want us to roll back our millage rate, if you want us to cut, what do we cut, right? Like, so where should we make these cuts? So who's going to be impacted by those cuts? Are we going to reduce police and fire salary? Are we going to reduce senior service resources? Like, if we make cuts, which can happen, we can make cuts, but where do we do it, and what's going to be the impact?
And I know inflation is brought up a good bit by hey, everything's raising. Why are you raising the bill? For us too, but it's getting more expensive to run the county as well. And one of the things that did increase the budget was the fact that the base pay, the minimum wage, right, was approved to go up to $17 an hour, which I think is a great thing, because that we want to hire, we want to A, be able to staff all of our departments, B, hire the best people for those roles, and C, we want those people to make enough to where they can live in our community too.
Live in the community they serve.
And you're you're seeing that there's not a lot of affordable housing options here in the county anymore. And so if somebody is making $15, $17 an hour, it's becoming very challenging to live in this county if you're looking for housing.
So even with police and fire, their salaries through ARPA dollars were raised to like a little over $50,000 to make it more competitive, to keep people in, because we're having a hard time just retaining our first line responders. But what I found out last night is we are still only at 70% of market rate, of competitiveness. So we're only better than 70% of the different markets. There's another 30% out there that are better than us. And so we could even raise it more just to retain our police and fire. I think that effort is important.
Competing, right? We'll raise those salaries and another one. Like, it's almost like it's just constantly, everyone's kind of competing with each other on that front. And yeah, it just gets more and more expensive at the end of the day. And I think there's some when I looked at the budget and I watched the video and I watched the work session, my understanding is that a lot of the increase in the actual budget, in other words, the amount of money they're raising, a lot of it's going to water, from my understanding. Mm-hmm. And then there's a few items here, a lot of them are going to salaries, part of that raise. They took it away from ARPA, made it more permanent, right. The increased salaries. And then, there's little things here and there also that are added to it. But really, the majority of it's water and the increased, salaries. And
water helps fix some of the stormwater issues that are out there, right? Fixing some of the detention ponds, some of the old infrastructure that's causing some of the flash flooding that happens, especially East Cobb has experienced. I know. You're right. I mean, it's becoming more and more expensive to operate. There's a lot of mandated expenses that are baked into the budget that the state requires. There's a lot of expenses that were committed last year. Here's another thing I learned. So the county budget works in a biennial fashion. It's just like the state legislature, where it's kind of in a 2-year schedule, right? So it's in kind of a 2-year chunk. So all the decision making is done like kind of before year one, then it operates in year one and year two. In year two, you're sort of renewing some things and increasing some items that need to be increased. So what's happening this year is about $4 million of like sort of uncommitted but proposed dollars. And that's really what's being proposed for any kind of additional expenditure here in year two of this 2-year process.
Yeah, so we're in the second year, like you said. So basically, a lot of the decisions and a lot of the, projections and budgeting and all of that was actually done last year.
Yeah.
And this is a renewal of that 2-year process. But it is state mandated. So what's happening is that because the county will collect more taxes, even with the millage rate staying the same. So the county itself did not raise the millage rate, but because the assessments went up, therefore that's why it has to go through this public hearing process.
The digest went up 15% year over year, and I think it's really a lot of it's due to this. I mean, commercial is growing great. Everything's really recovering from COVID. Things are going up, but with that, inflation is also increased cost of everything as well. But I mean, one thing Commissioner Richardson offered everybody, she explained to everybody the 2-year process and said, look, next year, as we go into the new budget proposal process, like that is when I need all of you engaged. I need to count on all of you to show up and talk with us about what you think should be included, what should be cut. So I think it was a really good, important educational experience. I think a lot of people just wanted to dive right into the budget and understand how to cut, but I think some of the background was important to understand of why we're at where we're at this year and the limitations that the Board of Commissioners has on really making any huge changes this year. Next year will be the time where like changes can really be proposed. One thing that kept coming up last night, Matt, was let's get rid of transit. So I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah. Transit, there is about $1 million in the new budget, $1 million increase towards transit. I believe it's around $25 million, out of the general fund that would be dedicated to transit. Very small when you look at the entire budget of the county. And, and it's sad that people equate or use this as a metaphor or something like that. They say empty buses. Millions of people take transit every year. And it's, yes, ridership, transit ridership has declined since the pandemic. That's something that we do need to address. We do need to figure out. But there's still over 1 million people who take transit every year.
Yeah, I want to hit on that number. So over 1 million people a year use Cobb County Transit, and less than 1 million people live in this county.
Yeah.
Right. And
So that's 1 million riders.
Yeah, but
So
I mean,
it's the
still,
same-
like,
yeah,
you know.
exactly.
But if everybody in the county just took one ride, it still wouldn't equal the amount of ridership that we have in the county. Right.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's, and the other stat that they always put out there is, it's something like 80% of people who take transit either take it to their job or to school. And so that just shows how important for those 1 million riders, like it's either their job that's dependent on it or their education, you know, and it just frustrates me to hear, oh, empty buses, empty that. Same thing with the bike lanes that gets brought up. Nobody bikes. If you start actually looking and start looking for people to use other methods of transit in the county, you will start seeing it. You will see that person waiting at the bus stop. Yeah. You will see that person walking along the road where there's no sidewalk. You will see that biker like on the side of the road and all that. Like, people are using other forms of transportation, even though we haven't really invested in it yet. And it just goes to show that we need to invest in it more and have it as an option for more people to use.
I think one thing a Better Cobb is doing, not only trying to support the people who really truly count on transit to use it, but also make transit like kind of cool again. Not like something that you just use it only to take to work, but come to a place like this if you could, or just anywhere around. Yeah. You know, just like kind of make it it's kind of a fun way to get around, taking a car off the street.
Yeah, there's someone on our Discord actually mentioned that they took transit to go, their car was in the shop and all of that, and that they actually enjoyed it. And I've started seeing that too. I've taken Cobb Link to go to Braves games, to go to Hawks games. I've taken Mar to go to Atlanta United games. I've taken it just to ride around on some days, just to experience it. And I actually realized that if I the experience of just sitting there and relaxing for 30 minutes or so and then getting to your destination is actually awesome.
Yeah.
And nobody is really in. I know there's a stigma about riding the bus or, nobody wants to ride the bus. Every time I've ridden the bus recently, I've actually loved it and I've enjoyed it. I get, I'm able to read a book, look at my phone, whatever, and then bam, I'm at the bus stop where I'm headed to. I'm at my destination, and I got there on time. And I don't know. So I keep telling, and it's kind of shocking how often people want to talk about transit who don't take transit, who haven't just experienced it, and both the good and the bad. In other words, we talk about ridership being down, all of that. It is so hard. If we wanted to go and take transit right now, you either have to pay an exact change or you have to use your Breeze card if you have a Breeze card, and it takes 24 to 48 hours to reload your Breeze card.
So I've told that story to multiple people about, and they're shocked about, if you were just to walk up to a Cobb County station with a $20 bill and want to get a card just to be able to take a number of routes around, it would take 24 hours up until now. So they just approved the integration with the Breeze card.
That's supposed to be coming in October. So, and that will be a mobile app that you could prepay on the app.
But before all this, it was just too damn hard to use, right? And that was the problem.
Any other transaction you make in this world, you expect to just show up and pay.
Yeah.
Except transit. You could actually, it's easier to go to the airport and buy a ticket to fly overseas as long as you have your passport than it is to ride the bus to your grocery store.
So I think a lot of advocates like yourself is just let's just make it easier. It doesn't even have to be an expensive fix. Let's just make it easier to use, and that could probably exponentially. And the problem is now it's just been so hard to use for so long. It's going to take some time to convince people it's not hard anymore, or it's easier than it used to be. Which is why I think the advocacy groups that you're a part of are important, just to really kind of get people to understand that there are efforts that are being made and that's continuing to be made just to make it a better experience for the rider.
And a referendum, no matter what is on the referendum. So right now the conversation is shaping, we're likely to go to referendum next year in November 2024. Right now the conversation is shaping what that referendum looks like. No matter what that referendum looks like.
You're talking about the M-Splost?
Yeah.
It's a mobile sales.
Yeah,
special
project local option sales tax. So get prepared. Yeah, and no, but so we're shaping what that kind of looks like next year. What projects are included on it. But no matter what, it's going to be very difficult. So a lot of surveys have been done, a lot of studies. Over 70% of the county, and in basically every survey that's done, says that yes, this county needs more transit. The challenge is paying for it.
Yeah.
So, and so how much, all of that. And only 13% of people currently use transit. So you're actually, you have to go to voters and sit there and try to get 50 plus 1%, right? To sit there and say, yes, we want this new tax. We see what the public reaction is for new taxes. And for something that not only do they not use, but they don't know a lot of their colleagues, neighbors, friends. It's I always call it otherism. It's the other, it's others. And we have to be able to sit there and say transit for everyone is what will benefit everyone. And really, and make it to where once we start getting more people to go to Braves games using transit, once we get more people to go to the Marietta Square taking transit instead of driving, whatever the case is, that's when we actually really start to see okay, yes, the community's bought in, everyone wants this.
But it's Cobb County, we're a growing county, we have an international airport, we need a transit system. We just need a transit system. And here we are at the Battery, there's a perfect place where it should be easy. It would take me an hour from East Cobb to take transit to here, right? So I drove here.
Yep.
But I would have loved to just gone onto a system and right
over
here, like I did the old
option.
Stadium. Yeah, exactly.
And I look at
just parking was a pain in the ass. It took me 10 minutes to find a parking space when I got here, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it goes back to I look at the facts. I look at 3 facts. 1, traffic sucks. Today it sucks in 2023. We got to do something to fix traffic, fix congestion, all of that. Number 2, we're going to grow. And not only are we going to grow, but Cherokee's going to grow, Bartow's going to grow, Paulding's going to grow. All of the counties that are exurbs that are outside of Cobb, they're going to grow as well. And all of their traffic is going to go through our roads to get to Atlanta. And then number 3, driving isn't for everyone. We already aren't really we have, very, very minimal infrastructure. And yet, we know somebody as part of a Better Cobb who sits there and doesn't want to drive. He has an e-bike. He can get to a lot of places on e-bikes, but he literally risks his life every time he does it. And he's been hit before, and he still does it. And it's one of those things where if we actually, the county, as we continue to grow, either continues to spend money to expand roads and expand car capacity, or we can actually start investing in other modes of transportation.
Yeah.
And then there's this concept called induced demand, which, is basically as you build that capacity, more people use it. Well, right now, transit, even though people say it's empty buses, the actual usable capacity and the uncompetitiveness of it makes it to where no one chooses to take transit. If you can drive versus taking transit, unless A, you driving is an option, or B, you're kind of crazy like me, you're going to choose to drive. We got to get to the point where transit is actually a competitive option, and then people actually start taking it in lieu of it. And then at that point, we actually start saving money, because then we're not spending more and more money expanding the highways. Nobody's complaining that we're spending billions of dollars to expand 285.
That's right.
Nobody's making a thing complaining about those tax dollars, and that's in the billions. Nobody's complaining when we spend 50% of our SPLOST to repave our roads, not even special projects to improve services, literally just maintaining and repaving our roads. And there's no complaints about that. And so it's one of those, that's even more than what we spend on transit every year. So to me, it's one of those things, I hope that by me talking about it, I help to open people's eyes, and they start to see, yes, there are other people who want other options. Yes, there is an opportunity, we do need to find ways to take cars off the road and give people other options to get around. And yeah, traffic sucks, so let's fix it by taking cars off the road. So, if I just keep bringing that up and going on my little rants, maybe I can start.
There's a number, so we talked about people using it for work or for school, people use it for recreation, but there's also a growing population, especially in District 2, it's a senior population. It's a whole group of people who are going to no longer be able to jump in their car and go to a doctor's appointment, go to the pharmacy, go to the grocery store. They are also going to need some kind of help. And maybe it's not a big bus as it's been described, maybe something else. And those other options are being looked at as well right now. I know with like some of the microtransit options.
Well, and a lot of it's privatized, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing a lot of 55 plus, a lot of nursing homes, all of that. And you'll see like, private transportation as an option. It's not very equitable as a solution. And I don't know if you've seen some of these prices of these, nursing homes, retirement homes, 55 plus communities. They aren't cheap.
Oh, even just jumping in an Uber is not cheap, and the technology can be hard to use. And so creating something that's easier to use, that's cheap for the user to experience it, or it's just really as a resource of being part of the residents. Like you're a senior, you've lived in Cobb County for 30, 40 years, like you should be able to get something back if you got to go to the doctor. So I think it's important. I think just because you drove by an empty bus doesn't mean they're all empty.
No.
It's because like the low Roswell construction project is happening. People are saying, I've never seen a wreck there. It's just like, well, just because you've never seen a wreck there doesn't mean it's like the tree falling in the forest analogy. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to get to before we run out of time is, so we were at the last meeting, and the one thing none of us expected to take as long as it did. Do you remember? The street lights. And so we don't know, there was a public hearing, as there is a public hearing for the taxes. So there was a public hearing called for street lights in a specific neighborhood, which I think we're all scratching our head like, this is weird.
Why?
And so like it doesn't typically happen. It seems like it's, some people said it's never happened before, but I did find out, like, you can call for a public hearing, right? So if you're part of an expense, like you can say, I want a public hearing on this. And so this HOA, I can't remember the name of the neighborhood right now. They've spent better part of like 2 decades trying to get streetlights in their neighborhood. A group of people finally got organized over the past 2 years. It said they did all the math, all the paperwork, all the due diligence, got 75% of the neighbors to say, yes, we want it. And still, like, we saw this like live HOA argument take place for 45 minutes, it felt like, at the meeting.
It was Parks 2 meetings ago, and then Streetlights this meeting. And you're sitting there, and I mean, we were just laughing because usually there was an entirely other item on the agenda that was 4 different streetlight districts. On the consent agenda, got approved like this. But this one was the one where, and I think it's actually in like the county charter or code or whatever it is, this whole process of streetlights. And I guess, if a certain area gets enough people to sign a petition for it, the property owners, it's got to be property owners, to sign the petition, and the county's almost obliged. They have to work out how it's paid and all of that. But it's almost required by the county to actually put it in. But people have a certain amount of days to go for a public hearing for it.
Yeah.
And this was the first time I think anyone kind of like knew that little clause was pulled out. And it was the HOA drama, internal drama of HOA, being elevated to the public comment hearing of this county commission.
It makes me really happy I don't live in an HOA. But I was like kind of happy. I was like, look, these guys are getting beat up. They're getting beat up. You're like, look, you know what? Let's make this public. Let's get it all out there. Yeah. Another thing, and I'm always learning something new. So the streetlights are mostly, if not all, paid for by the property owners, right? So the county facilitates everything happening. The HOA is shelling out the $40K to make it happen, which I think some of the neighbors who were complaining about it were like, we should be paying for it. And then the HOA came back and said, look, this money was already allocated anyway. We're not spending any less on any other items than our normal spend. And so they came prepared. The whole thing was pretty fascinating.
And then you had the people who weren't even in the neighborhood come up and,
and
equate it to the other like county
people
started like and it's just it became an experience for everyone there that was but at the end of the day, like, it was good to see. It's good to see that people care about things like that, and hopefully they can hash it out and find a solution and then move forward and be friendly neighbors to each other again. One other thing that got approved in that meeting, South Cobb Drive, the corridor between Windy Hill and Concord, that got approved to go to engineering for more of like a complete street concept. So they're going to, you'll see multi-use path, you'll see through traffic. So that's kind of what they're doing to Windy Hill, where if you're trying to drive through, you're going to have an uninterrupted, corridor just to drive through, but then they'll have local streets also. So if you're trying to go either to neighborhoods or retail near there, you'll use the local routes instead. So that's interesting. I think there's some changes that need to be made to the plan that will make the multi-use or bikers especially, safer. So we've got to submit those to the county, some of those changes.
What kind of changes?
So right now they've got the bike path inside the local lanes, and so there's, really quick to describe it, and I'll show you the images, that way you can kind of add it to the video. But right now, the current plan, this is the concept 4 of the South Cobb Corridor study, basically has them changing the 5-lane South Cobb. So you got 2 lanes going both ways, and you got the center kind of suicide lane. They would then change that to be 4 lanes, like 2 lanes going each way of just like through traffic uninterrupted. 1 lane going each way of local traffic, 1 lane for parking, and then multi-use trail, and then actually like bike path, and then pedestrian sidewalk allotment. So trying to separate bikes from the pedestrian, which is good, but the current plan has the bikers inside of the local traffic, where being outside of both local traffic and the parking would actually create a good little barrier for the bikers to be as safe as possible. And so it's still not ideal because the doors become a safety
Open
hazard.
up a door, like people parking, open up the door, bikes
But
flying
it still
by.
is better than a moving,
3,000
like a crash.
car,
Yeah. So it's not the best, but it's the best of the available options.
Incremental steps.
Yep.
But look, man, thanks for the idea to coming out here.
Yeah.
I think this is great. We'll do more of this, and I don't know.
I was driving by Kennesaw Mountain. We have to do one on the top of the mountain these days, right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So,
But anyway, cheers.
cheers, Cobb.
We'll see you at the next meeting. Come join us. We'd love to have you. It's fun. It's awesome. Thank you, man. You want to get lunch?
Well, next up, yeah, let's do it.
Sorry.
Let's at least get to a spot where we're not sweating just sitting here.